Blood sugar. Monosaccharides are single sugar molecules, glucose and fructose. When two monosaccharides bond together, they form a disaccharide, sucrose and lactose. Both are known as simple sugars because the body digests and or absorbs them quickly for metabolism. Monosaccharides can be absorbed into the bloodstream as is, no digestion required, while disaccharides are first broken down into their component monosaccharides. Honey is comprised of both fructose and glucose, yet it is also rich in enzymes, antioxidants, and polyphenols. Maple syrup and coconut sugar have some antioxidants and minerals, yet not as much. Fruits like bananas and apples, and some vegetables too, contain sucrose, glucose, and fructose, yet they also contain antioxidants, fiber, minerals, and vitamins. Breast milk truly packs a nutritional punch with fats, protein, and a full spectrum of vitamins and minerals to complement its lactose. The real difference between refined sweeteners, natural sweet whole foods, is the mode of delivery. Natural sweet foods are a food matrix. They are bursting with fiber, protein, fat, antioxidant, minerals, and other nutrients to mitigate the effects of sugar on our body. Inflammation is an effect of sugar on our body. After absorption in the bloodstream, glucose stimulates the pancreas to secrete insulin, which allows glucose to enter the cells all over the body. These cells use glucose for energy via a process called cellular respiration. This reaction produces molecules called reactive oxygen species, which causes inflammation. This is just part of the price we pay for eating foods. It happens to everyone. Scientists call it post-prandial inflammation. If we have plenty of antioxidants such as vitamin C and vitamin E, this inflammation quickly resolves. However, several factors increase this post-meal inflammation. Examples: overeating, a high carbohydrate diet, especially a diet high in refined carbohydrates, sweetened beverages as they have calories too, such as sodas. This is a double win for inflammation. Insulin resistant is when glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream. Depending on the food ingested, glucose enters the bloodstream at various speeds. Think a steady trickle. Slow metabolized foods such as complex carbohydrates or fruit eaten with a meal, or a sudden flood, quickly metabolized foods such as sugary sodas and refined products. Complex carbohydrates produce sustained, constant energy levels. Simple sugars result in a sugar high followed by a crash. Whatever the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream, the pancreas secretes insulin in proportional amounts. Insulin then helps ferry glucose into cells which utilize it for energy. That's how it's supposed to work, anyway. Excessive carbohydrate consumption, especially of quickly metabolized carbs, leads to an insulin overexposure. There's so much glucose around that cells simply don't need any more, so the body stores it as fat, and cells start to become desensitized to its effects. This is called insulin resistance. It's completely reversible, yet if not treated by dietary and lifestyle changes, leads down a slippery slope of conditions such as type 2 diabetes and polycystic ovarian syndrome. Infertility. Sugar, due to its elevation of insulin, affects fertility. While only 10% of women have polycystic ovarian syndrome, 70% of them actually have insulin-resistant induced PCOS. In other words, if you fix their insulin resistance, you fix their PCOS. In healthy women, insulin stimulates the ovaries to produce small amounts of testosterone. Elevated insulin, however, stimulates overproduction of testosterone, which interferes with ovulation and normal female hormone cycling. This is why most women with polycystic ovarian syndrome experience high androgens, which are male hormones, leading to anovulatory cycles, acne, and excess hair growth. Sugar affects men's fertility too. Consumption of 75 grams of sugar immediately decreases testosterone levels in men by 25%. That's the equivalent to about 2 12-ounce soda cans. Leptin resistance. Leptin is the hunger hormone responsible for suppressing appetite. In a healthy individual, fat cells called adipocytes produces leptin. The more substantious fat a person has, the more leptin produced. This leptin then travels to the brain and essentially says, there's enough fat stored, you can stop eating now. This safety mechanism against overeating is disrupted by chronic sugar intake. Excess sugar leads to elevated insulin and stimulates overproduction of leptin. Normal levels of insulin produce correspondingly normal levels of leptin. Leptin resistance, similar to insulin resistance, occurs when there is so much leptin hanging around that the body simply stops listening to it. This leads to decreased metabolism and increased hunger. Excess sugar causes weight gain. HPA axis dysfunction. Fructose. Fructose is a monosaccharide which does almost everything glucose does except with less efficiency. The body doesn't absorb it as easily. Glucose and protein help it absorb better, and many cells actually lack the ability to utilize it for energy. Fructose affects the stress response by causing atrophy of the hippocampus in the brain. The hippocampus, so named because it looks like a seahorse, helps us form memories and regulates the stress responsive via the HPA axis, an endocrine system consisting of the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenaline glands. These three endocrine glands communicate with each other to produce cortisol and other stress hormones. The hippocampus sits atop of them all, standing by to start or stop the process as needed. It is very important to have a healthy, functioning hippocampus. Intestinal permeability, damaging gut lining, leads to hippocampal atrophy. High blood sugar levels cause up to 10% more brain atrophy in the hippocampus than normal. It starts with increased intestinal permeability. High fructose intake allows toxins from certain bacteria called LPS, lipopolysaccharides, to leak through the gut lining into the bloodstream. LPS then triggers the release of inflammatory chemicals called cytokines from immune cells, which travel to the brain, stimulate cortisol release via the HPA axis. Cortisol is an incredibly catabolic hormone. It dissolves things. It damages the gut lining, causing more intestinal permeability, blood vessels in the hippocampus. The hippocampus has more cortisol receptors than any other places in the body. Chronic elevated cortisol from lots of the sugar feeds back to the hippocampus and causes it to atrophy. This allows for an eater greater stress response and more cortisol because the hippocampus, once damaged, can't shut down the HPA axis down. Eventually, other parts of the brain notice and turn cortisol release off. This leads to other low cortisol associated with HPA axis dysfunction and a variety of symptoms, including fatigue, aches and pains, and insomnia. Hippocampal atrophy is also associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, memory problems, and more. Blood sugar crashes, also known as quickly metabolized carbs, such as sugary sodas, dump a lot of glucose and or fructose into the bloodstream all at once. And when it's promptly used up, a sugar crash follows. When the crash happens, a bloodstream flooded of glucose stimulates cortisol release. Cortisol functions oppositely to insulin, whereas insulin shuttles glucose into cells. Cortisol pulls glucose out of the storage and back into the bloodstream. It's important for the bloodstream to have some glucose because it's used for energy. Cells need glucose. Excessive sugar intake, especially of quickly metabolized carbs, puts the bloodstream on a sugar roller coaster. Suddenly, there's a ton of sugar, then just as suddenly, there's none. Every time a crash happens, the adrenal glands release more cortisol. So this is just another way sugar's stimulation of cortisol leads to brain atrophy, HPA axis dysfunction. Nutrient deficiencies. Lots of sugars deplete our bodies of minerals we need, such as vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, chromium, and vitamin C. High fructose intake, as in high fructose corn syrup, is the problem, not the fruits and veggies. Exacerbates vitamin D deficiencies by increasing the activity of enzymes that degrade the important vitamin. And it decreasing activity of enzymes that help synthesize it. Since vitamin D is an important hormone that increases dietary calcium absorption, aids in immunity, and protects the prostate from cancer, deficiency is a big deal. In fact, men who regularly eat sugar-sweetened beverages have 3 times the risk of developing prostate cancer. Both excess sugar and elevated insulin also deplete the body of magnesium. Magnesium plays a role in up to 800 different enzyme processes, including aiding in muscle and nerve function, synthesizing DNA, and regulating blood sugar. If our bodies are deficient in magnesium, blood sugar levels are even more destabilized and further magnesium depletion occurs. Sugar's direct and indirect effects on hormones are insulin, female hormones, testosterone, leptin, cortisol, and vitamin D. Sugar is an endocrine disruptor. Moderation is key. Bearing a major health condition such as diabetes, your body can probably handle small and occasional amounts of sugar. Even better, if you're going to eat something sweet, have it with a balanced meal. The protein in the fat will slow the release of sugar into the bloodstream and buffer its effects. Keep in mind the glycemic index or glycemic load measures the same thing, except it also takes into account how much sugar is actually in the food. Most infant formula has the sugar equivalent to 1 can of Coca-Cola, so babies are being metabolically poisoned if taking formula. Sugar changes your metabolism, raises blood pressure, critically alters the signaling of hormones, and causes significant damage to the liver. These health hazards largely mirror the effects of drinking too much alcohol. Many humans suffer from severe complications of type 2 diabetes, the onset of which was caused directly by their consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates. Processed sugar can literally be considered a poison, which is anything that directly causes harm and can lead to a diseased state when you ingest it. Daily sugar consumption produces a continuous acidic condition in the body. The body combats an acidic condition by taking minerals from the body tissues to buffer against the acidic environment and rectify the imbalance. The body may absorb calcium from bones and teeth to protect the blood. As a result, bones weaken, resulting in osteoporosis, and teeth decay, resulting in cavities. Excess sugar eventually affects every organ in the body. Sugar has been proven to be the cause of several diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. When the liver has stored all of the sugar it can, the excess is returned to the blood in the form of fatty acid. These fatty acids are then stored as fat in the most inactive areas of the body: the belly, the bum, the breast, and thighs. When these areas become completely filled with fat, fatty acids are then distributed among active organs, the heart, liver, and kidneys, increasing the risk of developing diabetes and disease in these organs. Cancer cells survive only in an acidic environment and will die in an alkaline environment. Sugar keeps the body in an acidic state, and tumors are enormous sugar absorbers. Sugar consumption causes a hormone roller coaster of alternating high levels of insulin and blood sugar. These hormonal shifts can dramatically affect your attitude and your ability to concentrate during the day. Also, if you replace nutrient-dense foods with processed sugar, the chance of acquiring a disease or side effects skyrockets. Atherosclerosis, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, behavior problems, cancer, chronic fatigue syndrome,
colon cancer, coronary heart disease, food intolerances, kidney disease, liver disease, malnutrition, osteoporosis, overgrowth of yeast, especially candida, and tooth decay are all violent tendencies. Even if you don't consume candy or sweets outright, once you begin to read the labels of most snacks, cereals, and drinks you consume, you'll notice that it doesn't take much to consume. Reading labels, don't be thrown off by strange words. Quite often, one product will contain 5 or 6 different types of sugars. When you add up all forms of sugar, it is frequently the greatest source of total calories. The biggest mistake people make is falling for the marketing hype from juice manufacturers. Many products are made from concentrate and are not organic.